Okay, so welcome back. Let us start with our next question. As I have told you in models and theories, now there is a very clear trend. What type of questions they are asking? They will be asking you either the critical examine type, which is the traditional one, but these days they are also asking about the relevance in contemporary sense. So, one of the models and theories they haven't asked about the relevance in contemporary sense is Malthusian model. अभी तक इस पे क्वेश्चन पूछा नहीं गया, ठीक है. इन कंटेम्पररी टाइम्स व्हाट इज द रेलेवेंस. तो दिस इज समथिंग विच वी कैन एक्सपेक्ट कि आ सकता है कभी भी. तो critically examine the applicability of Malthusian theory of population in contemporary times. I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, so a straightforward question. Ideally, if you have geography optional, you should be prepared for this question because this trend is not new. We are seeing this trend from 10 years, more than 10 years they are asking. So it is our duty to prepare all the models and theories and their applicability relevance in contemporary sense. So I will treat, अगर ये एग्जाम में क्वेश्चन आता है तो मैं इसको ट्रीट करूंगा डायरेक्ट टाइप ऑफ, ठीक है. So critically examine the applicability of Malthusian theory of population in contemporary times. So can I say I can start with an introduction here and PPTs अपलोड नहीं हुई है क्या? Yes, they have been uploaded on the app. Okay. So if you talk about the introduction, अब माल्थस की जैसे ही बात आती है, tell me, and particularly the Malthusian population theory, can we say the idea of positive checks comes to my mind? The idea of negativity, pessimism, yes or no? Obviously yes. So यहाँ पर भी when I'm talking about Malthus, can I think of something contemporary taking place due to which the Malthus becoming relevant today? Yes or no? So can we say, in fact, not only this, something like uh, the problems like environmental degradation, global warming, and most recently the COVID-19 has brought into focus the ideas of Malthus. The ideas of Malthus. ठीक है, so that is I can start with, then I come to the main body. ठीक है, अब देखो because the question was theory of population, I will mostly limit myself to the theory which was there. But यहां पर एक कीवर्ड हो सकता था ideas on population. So when the question is ideas on population, what you can do, you can go beyond what was discussed by Malthus in the theory. In fact, if you know, Malthus continued to write on population, and he has, after writing the paper which is his theory, he has extensively written on population policy. ठीक है, सो एक कीवर्ड चेंज हुआ, उससे क्या हुआ, आंसर भी बदल गया. So if it was ideas, then I will also, when it is ideas, then I'll write about the theory part also, and I will write about the later writings also of the Malthus. ठीक है, so we have to be very very clear on this. And if you talk about the main body, so अब इसको मेन बॉडी को फ्रेम करने में, अब फर्स्ट आई एम टॉकिंग जस्ट अबाउट द थ्योरी पार्ट. इसी को लेते हैं जो क्वेश्चन है, थ्योरी ऑफ पॉपुलेशन इन कंटेम्पररी टाइम्स. So if we talk about this, what is the crux of Malthusian theory? Can we highlight certain crux of Malthusian theory? The crux of Malthusian theory is that population grows faster than the resource growth, as a result of which ultimately there arises a crisis which is inevitable. Can we say this is the crux of Malthusian theory? ठीक है, no matter what it is going to take place. So what is the applicability? That means, can we say, as we talked about the present problems, can they be explained from the perspective of Malthus? That is the applicability. So यहां पर जो हमने हाईलाइट किए हैं प्रॉब्लम्स को, can we talk about them? Like for example, the phenomena of global warming, the phenomena of environmental degradation, the phenomena of COVID-19, ठीक है, other things like rising famines, problems in Africa which are taking place. So many of the issues, Malthusian ideas can be used to understand that. But एक और चीज है, there is critically examine, और हमेशा मुझे ध्यान में रखना, I is equal to Pat. माल्थस मेरे लिए कभी अकेले एग्जिस्ट करता ही नहीं, उसके साथ हमेशा मेरे दिमाग में देयर इज ऑल्सो द कॉर्नुकोपियंस एंड द मार्क्स. ठीक है, और एक दूसरे से झगड़ा कर रहे हैं तीनों. तो ऑलवेज आई थिंक फ्रॉम दिस परस्पेक्टिव. सो हियर इट इज वेरी क्लियर कि फर्स्ट पार्ट में व्हाट आई विल डू, आई विल राइट अ समरी of Malthusian theory. So I'll say, according to Malthus, the population growth ब्रैकेट में कीवर्ड्स लिख सकते हैं इफ आई वांट. तो पॉपुलेशन इज ग्रोइंग In which proportion? Geometric proportion. So geometric growth. So population growth always outpaces the growth of resources. As a result, as a result, there, as a result, the application of positive checks, the application of positive checks, फिर से मैं ब्रैकेट को यूज कर सकता हूं. When you have to write in short few words, you can always use brackets. So यहाँ पर positive checks, can I say several problems like poverty, inequality, जो अभी हमने लिखे थे, low standard of living are inevitable. Inevitable. Then as soon as I have written, in fact देखो आइडली क्या करना चाहिए था मुझे, ये वाला जो स्पेस है यहां पर मुझे वो डायग्राम बनाना चाहिए था, और दिस शुड बी द स्पेस वेयर आई शुड हैव रिटन इन माय कॉपी. ठीक है. तो जो डायग्राम हम बार बार बना रहे हैं, दिस डायग्राम शुड हैव बीन ड्रॉन. So once I have written this, then I'll move on and say, in recent times, Neo-Malthusian scholars have asserted that the contemporary problems of the world are manifestation of the application of positive checks. Positive checks. तो इसमें कुछ कुछ चीजें we can just write it down. So like for example, अगर मुझे कुछ न्यू माल्थुसियन स्कॉलर्स के नाम लिखने हैं, तो I'll just tell you some important names like Ehrlich, Kaplan, and one Meadows et al. And Ophuls. These are some Neo-Malthusian scholars. So अब इसको exemplify करते हैं. Let us exemplify this by taking some examples. One exemplification can be done with respect to problems in Africa. The problems which are being faced in Africa. So देखो इसको, Neo-Malthusians like William Ophuls, have suggested that what is happening in regions, that what is happening in regions such as West Africa is clear indication, of applicability of Malthusian principles. To stop, he believes that the rise of authoritarian regimes, in Africa or in West Africa clearly indicates a situation of resource crisis, full stop. For democracy to exist, resource surplus is required. Resource surplus is required. Full stop. As resources decline, due to the rise of population, the world will be confronted with two possible futures. First, the first will see increasing conflict and associated forms of anarchy. Full stop. The second will see the emergence of increasingly authoritarian society. Full stop. Both of these are taking place in West Africa. ठीक है, सो एक पॉइंट हमने ले लिया. देन इफ वी लुक इनटू द प्रॉब्लम ऑफ ग्लोबल वार्मिंग उठाते हैं. ग्लोबल वार्मिंग. So if we talk about global warming, can we say what is global warming? Can we say global warming is simply this phenomena? Here is the capacity of atmosphere to recycle CO2, and this was this capacity. This is the limit of the atmosphere, and what we have done with the emissions. अगर मैं चाहूं तो CO2 emissions जो है उसका ग्राफ मिल जाता है. I can just put it. We are essentially about to cross it. ठीक है. So this is happening, this has happened. So can we say partly one of the reasons, or one of the reasons cited if you talk about by the Neo-Malthusians, is that it is increased global population. Increased global population. Can we say this idea was very clearly highlighted in limits to growth? Yes or no? In limits to growth, the third run, remember हमने third run की जो बात की थी, उस third run में main problem क्या था? Pollution became like this. Why? Because the capacity of the environment to recycle the pollutants was becoming limited. So threshold levels had been crossed. So according to limits to growth, this is outcome of what? It is outcome of the increased global population. Can we say, for example, if you take the example of India and China, can we say China and India, if we look into, their per capita emissions are low? Yes or no? But despite that, do we find that they are the top emitters of the world? It is outcome of what? The accumulated large population. So it is very clear. You can understand this was the reason why in Paris Agreement the differentiated responsibility concept was diluted. It had to be diluted because developed world, particularly US, it became very rigid. They said that till India and China don't sit on the table and agree for cuts, even if the developed countries achieves zero emissions, then also there will be global warming. So you will have to bring these countries on the table. Okay. So again, it is clearly manifestation of what? The problem of population size, which is the key highlight of the Malthusian idea. So I can talk about the phenomena of global warming, then take the case of COVID-19. दो तीन ऐसे केसेस लेकर के काफी होगा एक्सप्लेन करना. So if we take the case of COVID-19, can we say COVID-19 seemed to have originated from where? China? Wuhan in China. And one theory, it is not, in fact, not even theory, it is a hypothesis on origin of COVID-19. It very clearly tells us that it originated from where? From the wet of Wuhan. वहां से ओरिजिनेट हुआ था. ठीक है. So again, what is happening? The basic, इसका basic idea क्या है? This kind of zoonotic diseases, they are increasing because what is taking place? Population pressure is increasing, and this is leading to greater land use changes. Land use changes. And one of the land use changes, tell me, can we say, is it conversion of forest areas to agricultural land? Yes or no? ठीक है. So it is conversion of forest to agricultural land. And does it means that the distance between the wild and the human beings will decrease? Will there be more interactions? And greater interaction, does it means that there will be greater threat of humans acquiring such zoonotic diseases. ठीक है. So again, there is this case in COVID-19. One more thing we saw. We saw that the spread of COVID-19 was their relationship between population density and the spread of COVID-19. There was a direct relationship between the population density and the spread of COVID-19. So again, all these are clearly reflective of what? That we find Malthusian theory of population has applicability in recent times. तो ये हमारा पहला पर्सपेक्टिव हो गया, half of my main body. Then I'll also write a counter to this idea. And when I'm writing this counter, सबसे पहली बात तो यही है, can we say that seeing these problems just from the perspective of Malthus is oversimplification of reality? ठीक है. So essentially when we are doing this, we are doing oversimplification of reality, because we know that I is equal to fat. We know that the relationship between population size and resources is intervened by the factors of technology and affluence. By the factors of technology and affluence. So the reality is more complex and it should be understood in this sense. So if we again restart with the examples, तो सबसे पहले हमने किसकी बात की? अफ्रीका की. तो अफ्रीका वाला पॉइंट लिख सकते हैं. So Ophuls talks about West Africa. And he says that in West Africa, there is essentially the applicability of Malthusian principle. Okay? But Ophuls forgets that West Africa is essentially an underpopulated region. It is not an area of overpopulation. Okay? So West Africa is basically what? It is an underpopulated. Underpopulated region. That means the problems in West Africa, they are more related with other factors rather than just population size. They are related with one very important factor, that is टेक्नोलॉजी. लाइक हमने देखा था अफ्रीका का एक प्रॉब्लम क्या है? फूड प्रॉब्लम इसलिए इमर्ज हो रहा है बिकॉज द HIV सीड्स इन द स्टेपल क्रॉप्स ऑफ अफ्रीका दे हैव नॉट बीन डेवलप्ड. So this is one of the issues which is there. Second issue is related with affluence, which is in turn related with the political economy. Political economy. West Africa, tell me, can we say, is it a transition zone between the northern Islamic Africa and the central southern Christian Africa? ठीक है. So if you talk about, it is essentially a zone of transition and zone of conflict, which has given rise to political instability. And that is also one of the factors, one of the reasons which is reflected in the problems of West Africa. ठीक है, सो वी कैन काउंटर इट. हमने दोनों की बात कर ली, टेक्नोलॉजी भी फैक्टर है और पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी भी फैक्टर है. सिमिलरली वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट ग्लोबल वार्मिंग. So if we talk about the phenomena of global warming, it is pretty much clear that the global warming, the evidences of global warming began to come from 1950s. ठीक है, acceleration in global warming was seen in 1980s. ठीक है, so this is the evidences of global warming was taking place, and 1980s there was acceleration of global warming. Can we say, अगर मैं 1950 का पीरियड देखूं तो this was the period when the demographic transition started in rest of the world. सेकेंड एंड थर्ड वर्ल्ड में तो यहां से शुरू हुआ है डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन. Before this period, these countries were in the first stage of demographic transition, where the population is what? It is small. They are traditional societies. ठीक है, so we see that it is the period or it is the decade in which most of the third world countries and even some second world countries began the demographic transition, began their demographic transition. So very clearly can we say that that means much of the initial global warming, it was not outcome of population size. Was it outcome of the affluence, the higher consumption rate of the western countries, of the western world? ठीक है, so thus it was outcome of the high consumption rate or higher emission rates of first world countries, of the first world countries. ठीक है, so that is one. Was it also outcome of the technology? Can we say that? कब से ये बढ़ना शुरू हुआ है कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड का कंसेंट्रेशन? विद द इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन. ठीक है, सो इट हैज ऑल्सो मोर टू डू विथ industrial revolution, which brought changes in the technology of production. ठीक है, when you are writing about this की higher consumption rate of the first world countries, यहाँ पर you can also talk about the concept of differentiated responsibility, which was part and parcel of the Kyoto Protocol. ठीक है, it was based upon this historic responsibility of the developed world. So we can very clearly see global warming में भी it is not just the population size which is mattering, it is technology and affluence also which is मैटरिंग। ठीक है, इफ वी लुक इनटू द कोविड 19 का सिनेरियो, कोविड 19 में टेल मी दैट do if we look into the history of human beings, do we find that pandemics have occurred? Epidemics and pandemics have been common. In fact, the researchers say, अभी लिफ्ट के लिए यार क्लास चल रहा है, अभी नहीं हो सकता। ओके, सो इफ यू टॉक अबाउट द रिसर्चर्स से दैट many genetic characteristics of the human beings can be actually explained by the epidemics and pandemics which have taken place. So we can definitely say that the history of human has experienced several epidemics and pandemics. ठीक है, can we give example of the last pandemic which occurred? Spanish flu. ठीक है, so 1918 Spanish flu is a very good example. Can we say at that time the world was not facing such kind of population growth, despite there was emergence of Spanish flu? Can you give other examples? Like for example, if we look into many of the epidemics today, like Ebola, etc., they are emerging from where? They are emerging from African region, which is underpopulated region. Okay? So that means, can we say that it is more related with the biology, it is more related with science, technology. Can we say that evolution is a natural phenomena? So viruses also evolve, and thus ultimately there was such kind of evolution which was reflected in the form of COVID-19. So it is more related with science and technology. Similarly, other idea, when we are talking about the land use changes, can we say that these land use changes are also more importantly reflective of the inequality which exists in the world? Okay, it is related more with inequality in distribution of resources. In the distribution of resources. So what is happening? Can we say, if we look into the ownership, हमने इकोनॉमिक ज्योग्राफी में एक मैंने वो स्लाइड दिया था जिसमें, डू यू रिमेंबर, वी टॉक्ड अबाउट द ग्रोइंग इनइक्वालिटी इन द वर्ल्ड. कैन वी यूज इट हियर? Handful of people hold majority of the resources of the world, and that means rest of the people will be what? Will they be forced to press upon the other resources which are left out? And this is becoming the main cause of the fast land use changes which are taking place. So it has less to do with the exact population size increase and more to do with the unequal distribution of resources. Okay? So again we can counter that point also which we have written, and this is the way you will be writing. Finally you can conclude, thus the solution to these problems should be brought under the frameworks of, it is not just population management which will help. We will also have to do what? We'll have to ensure that our consumption becomes sustainable. The present use and throw culture, can we say this present use and throw culture, it motivates us towards more consumption, which is becoming one of the reasons for this environmental degradation and these problems. ठीक है? And also we have to develop sustainable eco-friendly technologies. और कभी कभी क्या होता है कि वी जस्ट डोंट थिंक लाइक, वी डोंट रिसर्च एनफ and we consider some technologies as eco-friendly. Like for example, there is so much research which tells us that probably the electric vehicles will degrade the environment far more than if you talk about the present vehicle. ठीक है, so many times we are just using this की eco-friendly technology है etc etc. We are not projecting the future. Okay, but that is how this answer should have been written. अब आते हैं इसमें, अगर कि वो लिखा होता कि थ्योरी के बजाय आइडिया ऑन पॉपुलेशन, तो माल्थस एक उसका मेन था जो पेपर लिखा उसने, द एसे विच ही हैड रिटन ऑन पॉपुलेशन. आफ्टर दैट माल्थस was severely criticized for his pessimistic view. So what he did, he answered his critiques in number of papers which he later wrote. And in these papers, later on, he began to emphasize less on number. Like in the theory, one of the contradictory point of was the numbers which he had given. For example, he talked about that population will double itself in 25 years. ठीक है, if we look into the history of the world, nowhere it was found. इंडिया ने ट्राई किया, 27 years हमें लग गया, बट 25 नहीं. But nowhere, if you talk about, it was found to be true. So numbers were controversial. He left the numbers. He stopped using the term arithmetic progressions and geometric progressions. ठीक है. He also started to focus more on solutions later on, because his ideas were criticized as being too pessimistic. Thus, he wrote extensively on population policy. So, उसके बारे में भी देख लेते हैं, because you should know. So, Malthusian, and it has nothing to do with the question which was there. Idea on population policy. So what was basically the Malthusian idea on population policy? Malthus was very, very clear that state should not interfere in the population or the demographic matters. ठीक है, there should be no intervention of the state. He was against the welfare policy. So he was strictly against the welfare policy. So why he was against the welfare policy? In welfare policy, he believed that welfare जब होता है तो what is taking place? Can we say state is transferring resources to people? State essentially transfers resources to people, and if there is transferring of the resources to the people, what will happen? Can we say the relationship is there? If more resources, there will be even more population growth. So it will lead to even more population growth. Even greater population growth. Thus he believed that the economic policy should be such that it would automatically take care of population issues. And what he found? He found that in the market based economic policy, such automatic tools are present. Automatic tools are present. And what are these automatic tools which are present in the market based or the laissez-faire policy? So in the market based policy, what happens? The burden of childbearing, expenses of the child, it all falls on the individual parents. Okay? So here what he believes, that there are inbuilt carrots and sticks. ठीक है. सो अगर स्टिक की बात करें तो स्टिक मेनली क्या है? इट इज द एक्सपेंसेस ऑफ रेजिंग द चाइल्ड falls fully on the individual parents. Fully on the individual parents. So obviously what will happen? People will think that having more children can lead to what? Decrease in the living standards. ठीक है. What is the incentives? Carrots क्या है? These are the incentives which are there, and sticks are the disincentives which are there. So what are the incentives? Can we say that in market based mechanism there is a freedom that people can raise their standard of living through hard work? Yes or no? So here there is a freedom that individuals can raise their standard of living through hard work. Also, one important thing which fascinates people is ownership of something. So can we say here in this type of system, can people have ownership of several resources? Like for example, ownership of land is allowed in such system. Communist system में नहीं होता ऐसा. ठीक है. So here there is ownership of resources like land. So it behaves as what? It behaves incentive to the people that they should have less children, because if a person has less number of children, or suppose if a person postpones the marriage or the choice of fertility, can we say there will be less burden, and during this period can that person be more free to do more hard work? ठीक है. आज की सोसाइटी में कैन वी से दिस प्रिंसिपल इज मोर और लेस एप्लीकेबल? मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल वी फाइंड दैट देयर इज चेंज इन द एज ऑफ मैरिज. इवन इन इंडिया देयर इज अ डिले taking place, particularly in the urban India. Similarly, if you talk about even after marriage, couples, if you talk about, they are taking the fertility decisions according to their financial capacities. So many people are thinking that ki abhi it is not the correct time, let's build a house, for example. Okay? So that is basically what Malthus is here talking about. So this was the basic idea of Malthus. अब इसका applicability की भी बात कर सकते हो अगर क्वेश्चन में पूछता है तो. So tell me, can we say that today in the era where the market based mechanism, can we say, has it become global? It has become global. Has become global. So for example, ये जो global हुआ है, can we say 1970s was the period from where the process has started? Many countries have adopted later on in 1990s, some adopted 1980s में adopt किया, कुछ ने 1990s में adopt किया, but more or less now the world has adopted this mechanism. Can we say this is also the period when we find that the decline in fertility in the developing countries has started? Yes or no? ठीक है. So the period between 1970s and 1990s is the period when the decline in fertility in the third world is obvious, particularly in the developing category. It is not there in the LDCs, but in the developing category. So can we say part of this, if you talk about decline in fertility, it is also related with the market based mechanism? Obviously yes. Now women, for example, इतनी सारी private companies आ गई हैं, so can we say there is more job opportunities and even women can avail jobs? Thus it has led to postponement of marriage decisions, fertility decisions. There has been very clearly delay. ठीक है. So again we can definitely conclude that a role has been played by the market based mechanism in the decline of the fertility. ठीक है. अब इंडिया में देखो फोर्सफुली कैसे किया जाता. पहले के टाइम में जाओगे 90 से पहले, तो यू विल बी फाइंडिंग दैट द गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स यूज्ड टू बी वेरी गुड. ठीक है. My parents, my father, he studied in a government school. He was very, very good in math. ठीक है. And he knows very good English also. गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में पढ़े थे आप. आज का कोई गवर्नमेंट स्कूल का बेचारा जो बच्चे पढ़ रहे हैं, कैन यू थिंक ऑफ देयर फ्यूचर? तो व्हाट वी हैव डन एसेंशियली, गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स को सिस्टमैटिकली बेकार कर दिया गया. That means people will be now forced to send their children to where? Private schools. And if they are forced to send their children to private schools, does it means that the burden or the cost of child raising, will it increase? Obviously it will increase. ठीक है. Can we say something similar has happened in healthcare? So with the privatization, now people are realizing that having more children can be actually a burden than advantage. And this is one of the reasons that we find that the fertility is declining. ठीक है. So that is the case. अब इसको भी counter कर सकते हैं. There can be a counter. Like for example, tell me that when we are talking about this decline in fertility, is it only or solely related with market mechanism? No, it is not. Can we say, is it also related with development of technology? Like for example, in countries like India, has the development of technology like contraceptives and their awareness and availability, has it played a role? Definitely it has. ठीक है. So it is not solely the factor of market based mechanism. In fact, we see today the fertility in India, for example, has declined even in those areas which are very rural. And can we say market does not wants to provide services there? ठीक है. So it is related with what? It is related with technology as well. Can we say it is also related with political economy? In most of the developing countries, if you talk about, they have a population management policies. India was in fact, first country to have a population control policy. ठीक है? So specific efforts have been made by the governments to also make sure that there is decline in fertility. Like for example, take the case of India. अभी हमने बात की कि there is people are now forced to send their children to private schools. Can we say the awareness related with the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, has it also played a role? Yes or no? This awareness that you have to send your child to school, no matter even if you are poor, then only you can secure the future of the child. Can we say this awareness has also played a role? Otherwise लोगों को क्या जरूरत है स्कूल ही भेजने की? चाइल्ड लेबर करवा करके उनको ज्यादा फायदा होगा. ठीक है? So here if you talk about the policies, the government policies like Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, they have definitely played a important role. In fact, गवर्नमेंट, अगर हम इंडिया की बात करें तो सर्व शिक्षा अभियान के अंतर्गत गवर्नमेंट इज प्रोवाइडिंग सो मेनी incentives for the schools. There is still the state machinery of the school which is there, the midday meal for the retention of the students, if you talk about. So all of these, if you talk about, has definitely played a role. So it is not just the privatization, the market based mechanism. Okay? So it is combination of these factors. So that is basically this. Then moving on, next question पर आते हैं. Question 4. Malthus and Marx seem to be simultaneously closer as well as apart. Comment. I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay. So obviously ये भी बहुत डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन है. There is a question, if you look into the past years, there is a question on comparison of the Malthusian and Marxian idea. So simultaneously closer मतलब similarities and apart means differences. So it was a direct type of question. यहाँ पर मैं थोड़ा सा कंटेंट तुम लोगों को देता हूँ which is not written in majority of the books which you are reading. ठीक है? तो थोड़ा सा हम डिटेल में जाते हैं इसको. तो आई होप कि मार्क्स की थ्योरी सबको पता है. मार्क्स की थ्योरी सिंपली क्या कहती है कि द सोसाइटी इज डिवाइडेड इनटू 2 क्लासेस. So one class is the capitalist class, which is essentially also rich. Other class is basically what? It is the labor class, which is the poor. What is being possessed by the rich capitalist class, the bourgeois class? Essentially, they possess, if you talk about, they have ownership of capital. They own the capital. And since they own the capital, what they are doing, this capital is invested in productive investment. Okay, production. So investment and ownership of production. Since they have the ownership of the production process, what they are doing, they are leading to exploitation of the labor, How they are exploiting the labor? By taking majority of the share in the profit. ठीक है? By taking majority of share in profit. How majority of share will be taken? By reducing the wage rates, by giving minimal wage rates. ठीक है? So what will be the outcome of this phenomena? The outcome of this phenomena will be creation of more capital. Of more capital, which is the profits that they are earning. And since it is there, what will happen with this capital? It will again be reinvested and more profits would be made. So what is the outcome of all this phenomena? Outcome is that they will keep growing richer. They'll keep growing richer. ठीक है? So this is happening in the capitalist class, rich class. When it comes to the labor or the poor class, labor or the poor class responds to capital accumulation by the rich, the capitalist class. They possess what? They have ownership of labor only. So the only ownership they have is of the labor. They don't have ownership of the resources. So in response to capital accumulation, what they will do? They will lead to labor accumulation. ठीक है? So in response to capital accumulation, they will lead to labor accumulation. So you can understand labor accumulation का मतलब क्या हुआ? Increase in population growth. So essentially this means that there is increase in population growth. So if there are more members in the society, in the family, that means more working hands, and that means more income will come back in the family. So increase in population growth. So as increase in population growth happens, can we say there will be increased labor supply? the supply of labor will increase, and as the supply of labor increases, can we say mismatch between demand and supply of the labor will arise? So essentially what will happen, there will be creation of a industrial reserve army. Industrial reserve army, as basically you can understand, many people will be unemployed and underemployed. So this presence of this industrial reserve army, what it does, it gives advantage to the capitalists because there is too much competition for the same job, and other people will be willing to work at lower wage rate. So there will be reduction in the wage rate. And if it is so, can we say there will be increased poverty? And if there is increase in poverty, can we say again फिर से this response will be there, so population growth will further accelerate and problem will keep on magnifying. So the gap between rich and poor will keep on increasing. It will keep on widening. Okay? So this is the problem according to Marx, that in capitalist societies, this is leading to the problems of overpopulation. He believes that it is not the availability of resources. It is more related with what? Scarcity of resources. This is the main problem and not the availability of resources. Okay? So that is something which is there. फिर उसके बाद मार्क्स सोल्यूशन की भी बात करता है. So what is the solution which he is talking about? He believes that the problem exists in the political economic system. Capitalism is exploitative system. Thus he talks about a violent overthrow of capitalist system. And what is it has to do? It has to be replaced. It has to be replaced by a communist system. ठीक है, which is based upon social justice. So this is the solution. So उसकी थ्योरी दो पार्ट्स में, पहले प्रॉब्लम्स को आइडेंटिफाई करना एंड देन ही गिव्स द सॉल्यूशंस एज वेल. So this is the solution according to Marx. ठीक है. ओवरऑल मार्क्स का जो बेसिक आइडिया है वो बेसिकली व्हाट इज द आइडिया, ही गिव्स अ कंसेप्ट. जो मार्क्स की पूरी थ्योरी है, यू नो दैट मार्क्स हैज नॉट गिवन एनी special theory of population. Some Marxist geographers, what they have done, they have inferred this theory from his overall writing. Okay? So this overall theory of the Marx is referred to as historical materialism. Okay? So he has studied the system of Europe and identified how this progression has taken place. So Marx कहता है कि if you go back in the society, early society, there was presence of a primitive communism. ठीक है, a primitive communism existed. So the resources were controlled by the community rather than by the individuals. Then came the juncture in Europe when the king decided to increase production and everything, and thus went for feudalism, developed a feudalistic society. And with feudalism, rich and poor, this gap began to widen up. Ultimately, when you can understand, when the productivity in agriculture stagnated, and at that time, luckily what happened, there was also technological revolution. So it became industrial revolution. So the same feudal landlords, they, because they possessed capital, they became the capitalists. So essentially started the capitalistic society. So what Marx believes, that if this system continues, then the gap between rich and poor will keep on increasing, because it is a system which is unethical. कैसे unethical है? Because you can understand, he believes कि ownership should be given only to those things where man hours have entered, which have been produced by the human beings. Only those can have those resources, or those things can have private ownership. How you can give private ownership to the things which are naturally present? For example, land, it is naturally present. Today we are doing carbon trading. Can we say atmosphere has not been created by the human beings? It is a natural phenomena. How you can give private ownership or private quotas to the countries? Okay, so this is the basic idea, and thus he believes that because the inequality will keep on increasing, ultimately a time will come when people will become fed up. Thus there will be a violent revolution. And with this violent revolution, ultimately there will be establishment of again communism. ठीक है. So this is the basic idea of Marx. अब इसमें मैंने क्वेश्चन लिया नहीं है, बट यू शुड प्रिपेयर द मार्क्सियन थ्योरी. अब उसमें कई तरह के क्वेश्चन पूछे जा सकते हैं. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल, वन क्वेश्चन कैन बी आस्क्ड इज द critique of the Marxian theory. ठीक है. So there are many problems associated with the Marxian theory, like his rigidity related with, if you talk about systems, structures, what he has done, he has reduced human beings. ठीक है. For Marx, can we say the political economy system becomes more important than the humans? So humanists are critical of Marxian theory. ठीक है. Other things, like for example, he is taking into account several things like the labor's availability, demand and supply, the wage rate, etc. So his theory is mostly economic. We find that several other factors are also involved in taking the fertility decisions. He has not given weightage to those factors. Like for example, अभी जो हमने बात किया, can we say availability of the technology? That is also a factor. He talks about, like he says that communist systems are the ones where there will be no such problems which will exist. Population problems नहीं होंगी. ठीक है. मार्क्स कहता है कि there is in communist system, once it is the communist society established, the population situation will remain in optimum case. माल्थस में क्या था? ऑप्टिमम एक पॉइंट था, उसके बाद तुरंत ओवर पॉपुलेशन आ जाता है. In Marx, he says that if you achieve this type of society, communist society, the society will remain in the optimum stage of population. Can we say कि ये तो बिल्कुल contradictory है of what we are seeing? Do we find that even the communist countries are facing similar type of problems of population like the other countries are facing? Yes or no? That means there are other demographic processes which are more important, which are more universal than recognized by Marx. Yes or no? Like for example, अगर हम देखें तो more or less with some variability, do we find that actually the demographic transition theory applies to whether it is a capitalistic society or whether it is a communist society? ठीक है. So there are more other, if we talk about demographic processes which have become more important. और भी प्रॉब्लम्स है मार्क्स की थ्योरी में. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल यहां पर ये जो पीरियड है, दिस इज द पीरियड ऑफ ट्रांजिशन. तो यहां तक कैपिटलिस्टिक सोसाइटी थी. आफ्टर दैट देयर इज ट्रांजिशन टेकिंग प्लेस टू कम्युनिस्ट सोसाइटी. मार्क्स has not written much about this transition, how this demographic transition, how this transition will be taking place. And this has led to what? Many of the countries, the communist countries, having no idea of how to reach that stage of optimum population, how to achieve, what to do during that transition. ठीक है. Like take the case of China. If we take the case of China, in China there was swings of the policies which was taking place. When Mao was in power, he favored a pro-natal policy. When moderates came to power, they always practiced population control policy. ठीक है. So they were not very clear of what to do during this transition, and that is why there was this flip-flop which was taking place during the period, if you talk about between the 1950s and 1970s, early 70s tak, there was a continuous flip-flop in the population policy of China. ठीक है. So again, this is something which can be asked. Now coming back to our question, Malthus and Marx seem to be simultaneously closer as well as apart. So if you talk about Malthus and Marx have dwelled upon the problems of population in the capitalist societies. You know, Marxian theory is also what? It is, can we say, a critique of capitalism? ठीक है. तो वो जो बात कर रहा है सारी वो तो कैपिटलिस्टिक सोसाइटी की बात कर रहा है. सो बोथ ऑफ देम हैव dwelled upon which type of society? Capitalistic society. Problems of population in the capitalistic societies with, और या फिर इसको लिख सकते हैं from their own existential histories. ठीक है. So you can understand Malthus was a clergyman. ठीक है. So clergyman's, अगर if you are a people of God, in general you will have good access to resources. ठीक है। तो उसकी प्रॉब्लम क्या थी? उसका प्रॉब्लम था कि ये जो सिस्टम है वो चलता रहे, स्टेटस को मेंटेन रहे, ठीक है, बट ऐसा सिचुएशन ना आए कि पॉपुलेशन इतनी बढ़ जाए कि मेरा शेयर रिसोर्सेज में कम हो। ही थॉट फ्रॉम दिस पर्सपेक्टिव, दैट वाज हिज एग्जिस्टेंशियल हिस्ट्री. If you know about Marx, you must be aware that Marx have experienced huge, if you talk about problems in his life, huge poverty, unemployment. So that was his existential history, where he saw that he became part of the industrial reserve army. So that was his perspective, his existential history. And thus Malthus receives, or he goes with the perspective of capitalism. If you talk about Marx, goes with a critique of capitalism, that is the communist perspective he develops. Okay, so from their own existential history, can we say as a result there are some similarities as well as differences in their ideas on population. Ideas on population. ठीक है, सो आई विल कम टू द मेन बॉडी, और मेन बॉडी में सीधा लिखना शुरू कर दूंगा. तो सबसे पहले हम बात करते हैं फिलोसॉफिकल. Philosophical similarities and differences. So if you talk about both Malthus and Marx, what they did, they favored progress. Both of them favored progress. But can we say they differed with respect to form of such progress? So if you talk about Malthus, for Malthus, this progress was evolutionary progress. ठीक है, so evolution of the society was taking place. Of what? Which type of society? The same capitalistic society. ठीक है, so evolution of the capitalist society. But if you talk about Marx, it is pretty much clear that Marx favored a more revolutionary progress rather than an evolutionary progress. So what he wanted to do, he wanted to violently overthrow the capitalist society and replace it with a communist society. So this is one difference as well as similarity which is found between them. Then if you talk about both had a pro-utilitarian view. But they differed also. So if you talk about difference, दोनों में क्या था? Malthus, utilitarian view was anti-revolutionary. It was anti-revolutionary, which which regarded the greatest happiness to be gained, the greatest happiness to be gained from maintenance of status quo, maintenance of status quo. Full stop. His utilitarian view, his utilitarian view also meant preservation of private property, preservation of private property and private enterprise. ठीक है, तो देखो माल्थस का पर्सपेक्टिव क्या था. माल्थस बिलीव्ड दैट majority of the time revolutions lead to greater misery. He found that one problematic system, many times in history if you look into, one type of problematic system will be replaced by a more problematic system. ठीक है, so you can understand कि जो लोग अन्ना मूवमेंट में पार्टिसिपेट किए थे, they can understand it better. Okay. If you talk about Marx utilitarian view was that humans' greatest happiness was achieved. Humans' greatest happiness was achieved through conscious recognition of tyranny, conscious recognition of tyranny, misery and exploitation, recognition of tyranny, misery and exploitation, and its subsequent overthrow, and eradication. So that is their view. Then third, both agreed that human are rational. Both agreed that humans are rational, but again, even on this point, they have differed as they view the rationality differently. So for Malthus, what was rationality? Malthus के लिए क्या rationality था? That human beings should recognize that there is limit of availability of resources and act accordingly. That was rationality for Malthus. ठीक है, सो लिख लेते हैं इसको. So for Malthus, rationality meant that humans could recognize the limits to availability of resources, and thus to population growth. And thus to population growth. So there is limit to population growth, he's saying. So this was the idea of Malthus. Then if you talk about Marx differed. So for Marx, लिखो, for Marx, being rational meant that humans can use their intellectual capabilities to indefinitely extend and improve his productive powers. Full stop. This makes the need for population controls irrelevant. Need for population control irrelevant. ठीक है, so you can understand this point. Malthus का जो idea था, Malthusian idea on technology was basically what? His view on technology was that there was limit to technology. ठीक है, but Marx का view was there is no limit to technology. Technology can keep on supplying resources to you. So with respect to technology, he had a positive view with the role of technology. The only problem was he saw that in capitalistic system, the technology was used by the capitalists to exploit labor. And thus technology becomes problem in capitalistic system. ठीक है, otherwise technology is what? It is available and it will allow you to keep growing the resources. And that is why in communist system, technology will play a positive role. And this will allow the society to remain in optimum population stage. Okay, so this was another problem or a difference and similarity. Then both have focused upon the idea of struggle. Both have focused upon the idea of struggle, but there are differences between them. So if you talk about the differences, tell me, can we say that for Malthus, this struggle was a struggle for existence? For Malthus, this struggle was the struggle for existence. That means the battle was taking place between whom? Human and environment. Okay. On the other hand, for Marx, the idea of struggle implied class struggle. For Marx, the idea of struggle implied the class struggle. ठीक है, so 4 philosophical differences, similarities याद रखना. Then economic differences and similarities या similarities and differences. Similarities पहले लिखना चाहिए, difference बाद में. Okay. So number 1, if you talk about both of them have agreed that poverty exists. ठीक है, इन कैपिटलिस्टिक सोसाइटीज, या जिस सोसाइटी की वो बात पढ़ रहे थे. But can we say the cause of why the poverty exists differs between Malthus and Marx? ठीक है, so what is the difference? Malthus sees the poverty to be space related phenomena. He saw the poverty to be more space related. On the other hand, if you talk about Marx, he saw poverty and inequality to be more time related. टाइम रिलेटेड फिनोमेना. ठीक है, अब इसको समझते हैं. तो देखो, अगर माल्थस की बात करें तो टेल मी, इफ आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट एन एरिया विच इज अ डेजर्ट. ठीक है, so here we are talking about a desert, here we are talking about a fertile river valley. So tell me, can we say that in a desert will this be a carrying capacity? Yes or no? Carrying capacity, will it be low in desert? And in a fertile river valley, will the carrying capacity be greater? So if population growth is taking place in a desert, can I say कि यहाँ पर crisis will come faster? The checks will be applied faster. While here, the society can continue to grow. So the poverty will come later here. The problems, the positive checks will be later in such area. So that means what he is considering? He considers that it is actually availability of the resource. It is more related with the availability of the resources. Do you get my point? Okay, so this is how in case of Malthus it is space related. Inequality and poverty are space related. But in Marx, these phenomena are time related. Can you understand this? जो अभी हमने historical materialism की बात की, is the problem of poverty and inequality increasing with time? It was very less in early times. With time, it kept on increasing. ठीक है? So for Marx, it becomes what? Time related issue. Then, if you talk about in both of them, second point, in both there is the idea of resource availability is discussed. So both of them give importance to availability of resource being one of the issue in the problem. But where they have differed, they have differed with their perspective on what is resource. Okay, the difference exists on their perspective on the concept of resources. So if you talk about Malthus has taken which type of view of resources? Static view of resources. Static view of resources. ठीक है? So essentially you can understand static view of resources क्या कहता है? It says that the resources, it treats resources as natural endowment. That means they are given. So it treats resources as natural endowment. That means these are resources are given. If you talk about Marx, however, Marx differs on this. Marx takes the dynamic view, या फिर इसको हम टेक्नोसेंट्रिक व्यू भी बोलते हैं. डायनेमिक और द टेक्नोसेंट्रिक व्यू ऑफ रिसोर्सेज. ठीक है. सो इफ यू टॉक अबाउट द डायनेमिक और द टेक्नोसेंट्रिक व्यू ऑफ रिसोर्सेज, ये क्या कहता है? इट सेज दैट resources are not given but produced by the humans through development of technology. Through the development of technology. ठीक है. So this is the basic difference between Malthus and Marx on the conception of resource. Then there are some demographic similarities and differences between them. Like both of them have discussed the idea of overpopulation. Both have discussed and agreed that it exists. दोनों एग्री करते हैं कि ओवर पॉपुलेशन एग्जिस्ट करता है. ठीक है. बट यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड दे डिफर. फॉर माल्थस, व्हाई ओवर पॉपुलेशन इज एग्जिस्टिंग? फॉर माल्थस इट इज इनएविटेबल. ओवर पॉपुलेशन फिनोमेना इज इनएविटेबल. So for Malthus it is inevitable. Why it is inevitable? Because ultimately population growth will always outpace the resource growth. ठीक है. So it is inevitable because population growth will always outpace the resource growth. So that is inevitable. So ultimately because of this what will happen? There will be scarcity of resources will arise. So this is Malthusian idea. Marx क्या कहता है इस पर? Marx says that it is not inevitable. It is essentially outcome of specific set of societal relations. ठीक है. So did we saw it was the societal relation where there is the society is divided into capitalists and labor. ठीक है. So it is a specific set of societal relations when they are existing, then this problem will be arising. That means, can we say Marx believes that overpopulation is not outcome of scarcity of resources, It is outcome of distribution of resources. It is outcome of distribution of the resources. So both of them have talked about overpopulation. Both of them have talked about the idea of optimum population. So both have agreed that there is optimum population where highest standards of living are achieved, but if you talk about they have differed also. So what is the difference? In case of Malthus, can we say optimum population scenario was it permanent, or was it for just a period of time? It was just for a period of time. So in case of Malthus, optimum population is a temporary phenomenon. But for Marx, what he believes, that the optimum population, if you talk about, it can become a permanent phenomena if there is establishment of a communist system. So it becomes permanent in a communist system. ठीक है. So this is the difference and similarities between them. तो 8 differences हमने लिखे हैं यहाँ पर, और मुझे लगता है कि अगर ये क्वेश्चन आता है एग्जाम में तो either this question will be a 15 marker or a 10 marker. ठीक है. तो दोनों को करने के लिए we have enough stuff here which will give us good marks. Okay. क्वेश्चन नंबर 5 पर आते हैं. डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन इन रियलिटी इज अ सेट ऑफ ट्रांजिशंस एक्सप्लेन. ठीक है, ये क्वेश्चन मैं कभी नहीं चेंज करता हूं किसी 500 प्लस में. द रीजन इज दैट दिस क्वेश्चन विल गिव यू द बिग आइडिया ऑफ essentially how demographic transition can be applied. The model can be applied in number of ways. ठीक है. So what is the meaning of this question? Demographic transition in reality is a set of transitions. ठीक है. इसका सीधा मतलब क्या है कि if we talk about demographic transition, within demographic transition many other forms of transitions are taking place. ठीक है. If you have read the demographic transition theory properly, you must be aware कि demographic transition theory क्या कहता है. डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन थ्योरी इट सिंपली एज्यूम्स, ये कहता है कि फर्स्ट ऑलवेज व्हाट इज ट्रांजिशनिंग, व्हाट इज बिगिनिंग टू डिक्लाइन, द ट्रांजिशन ऑलवेज बिगिंस विथ द डिक्लाइन ऑफ डेथ रेट. ठीक है, दैट इज इट्स फर्स्ट प्रोपोजिशन. सेकेंड प्रोपोजिशन ये क्या कहता है, अल्टीमेटली द फर्टिलिटी ऑल्सो बिगिंस टू डिक्लाइन. एंड थर्ड थिंग व्हाट इट सेज, it essentially says that in this decline or in this transition of, if you talk about fertility and mortality, several socio-economic parameters of the society also change. ठीक है, that means transition in those socio-economic parameters is also taking place. So this is the demand of the question. Demographic transition in reality is a set of transitions. So if I understand this, can we say one type of transition within demographic transition is the mortality and health transitions which are occurring? One type of transition is the fertility transition which is taking place. If there is mortality and fertility transition, tell me, can we say will there be also age transition taking place? There will be age transition also take place in the society. Then there is also migration transition which will take place. ठीक है, इनिशियली सोसाइटी कैसी होती है? इट इज वेरी स्टैटिक, there is very less mobility in the society. But as the stage 2 comes, can we say the problems of overpopulation will begin to start? And thus there will be more labor. So this labor particularly will do what? It will try to search employment opportunities elsewhere. And thus what will be happening? There will be migration transition also beginning. ठीक है, when there is demographic transition, उसके साथ साथ और क्या हो रहा है? There is urban transition also taking place. Urbanization भी change हो रहा है, देखेंगे अभी कैसे. Also there can be other things like household and family transition. Can we say economic growth transition also occurs? ठीक है, there is also economic growth transition which is taking place. So many transitions are accompanied with the progress of demographic transition. That is the meaning of this statement which is given there. So if you talk about the mortality and health transition, clearly demographic transition, it is written, यहाँ से पढ़ लेते हैं. DTT starts with the health and mortality transition, which is essentially result of what? Epidemiological transition and progress in modern medicine. As a result, what is happening in epidemiological transition? It believes that there is initially a ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी होती है. तो जो ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी होती है उसकी खास बात क्या होती है? हियर देयर इज हाई मोर्टालिटी. ठीक है, the rate of mortality is high in traditional society. Why the rate of mortality is high in traditional society? The primary reason is that the cause of death is related with, the most important cause of death is parasitic and infectious diseases. ठीक है, so tell me, if the most important cause of death is parasitic and infectious diseases, is it possible that these infections, can they spread to large population? Yes or no? So they can spread to large population, and that means what will happen? When there can be phenomena like epidemics will be very common. ठीक है, and can we say thus mass mortalities will also take place? So this is happening in the traditional society, and that is why the mortality is higher. और अगर तुमने डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन का मॉडल देखा है, डायग्राम, तो टेल मी, इन द स्टेज 1 विच इज द ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी, इज दिस द बिहेवियर ऑफ मोर्टालिटी? So why this kind of behavior of mortality is seen? Because of the same reason, because there will be famines, there will be epidemics. When what will happen? There will be, the death rate will suddenly increase. So this is what is happening in the traditional society, but ultimately there is transition which is taking place. So ये transition की अगर हम बात करें तो ये developed world में first ये transition start होता है. And how it starts? One, in the developed countries, the political setup became more stable. ठीक है, and as the political system became more stable, there was better food security achieved. ठीक है, so they were able to take care of the nutritional problems. That is number one. Second, what happened in the developed countries with the technological revolution, industrial revolution, there was also development of modern medicines. ठीक है, so with this modern medicines and also the idea of hygiene which developed, as a result of which they were able to slowly make sure and control over these diseases. I hope it is clear. So धीरे धीरे क्या हुआ? That means now the cause of death will slowly, gradually move towards other causes rather than the death related with such parasitic and infectious diseases. So when the society becomes a modern society, in a modern society, the primary cause of death is it is related with lifestyle diseases. Okay, so the primary cause of death becomes lifestyle diseases. So in epidemiological transition क्या होता है? There are 3 stages. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3. ये मैं बताऊंगा, बाद में मटेरियल भी दूंगा इसका. When we'll talk about the phenomena like IMR, MMR, कल जब बात करेंगे तो I'll just talk about. Here in short, I am just telling you. So progress in modern medicines. As a result, parasitic and infectious diseases will be controlled, leading to maximum impact in the lower part of the pyramid in the early stage of demographic transition. So because of which a sharp decline in IMR, child mortality, etc. will be seen. Thus, the demographic pyramid would become broader and it will become tapering at the top. In case of advanced countries, if you talk about, there is one more transition is taking place. Health and mortality transition में आज के टाइम में एक और transition हो रहा है. And what is this transition? This is taking place in developed countries now. Again, so what is this transition? We are finding that there is further decline in the mortality occurring in the developed world. So what is the reason for this further decline in mortality? You know कि 1940s तक almost सभी developed first world countries ने transition complete कर लिया. They reached to the 4th stage. And after this, you know, fertility goes very down. So they started to face the problem of labor scarcity. Okay? They tried pro-natal policy, but ultimately they realized that once fertility begins to decline, the process becomes irreversible. So fertility didn't increase. अब problem क्या था? They had to import people through migration or do something internally. So one idea which emerged was that if you can make people more healthy, okay, then what will happen? They will be able to work for longer period of time than the present if you talk about the retirement ages. Okay? So you'll find that during this period of 1960s, 70s, there was huge investment which was made in these technologies. And there was growing awareness about the lifestyle. What is a healthy lifestyle? So today you see, आज की डेट में देखो कितने सारे apps आ गए हैं which will tell you how to live healthy. So this revolution started where in the developed country. And as a result, they have been able to actually reduce the mortalities. And mortalities of whom? Of old age. Okay? People who are crossing 40. So there the mortalities have reduced. So there is another transition which is taking place. बाद में देखेंगे इसका impact उनके लिए negative हो रहा है. They thought that people will be working for longer period. Developed world में वैसे ही इतनी prosperity है. And retirement की एज के बाद कौन काम करना चाहेगा? उससे पहले लोग आज सोचते हैं कि let us better is we get retired. So it didn't materialize. They talked about second demographic dividend, but it never became a dividend. It became in fact a burden. Okay? So we'll talk about that. But this is another health change which is taking place in the developed world. Then there is fertility transition. The question is why fertility transition occurs only after the mortality transition. क्यों सबसे पहले डेथ रेट ही कम होता है, फिर उसके बाद फर्टिलिटी रेट गिरना शुरू होता है आफ्टर अ टाइम लैग? ठीक है, द मेन रीजन इज इनिशियली इफ यू टॉक अबाउट पीपल ट्रीटेड चिल्ड्रन एज सिक्योरिटी. ठीक है, it was their security for the old age and many other things. Ultimately, this means that you should have more number of children. Also at that time, because mortality was high, so if you are producing 7-8 children, तब उसमें से जाके 2 बचेंगे एडल्टहुड तक. ठीक है, 2 रखना जरूरी था. और यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड हैविंग 2 मेल चाइल्ड्स, क्योंकि एक लात मार के निकाल सकता है, तो कम से कम एक, 1 विल टेक केयर. एंड यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड बिकॉज ऑफ दिस देयर इज ऑल्सो प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ गर्ल्स बीइंग बोर्न. सो ओनली अल्टीमेटली इफ यू हैव हाई TFR, then only you can ensure that you'll have in your old age 2 male children. One of them at least will take care of you. ठीक है, so it was necessary. But ultimately, if the mortality declines and it declines to sufficiently low level, can I say that most of these children will survive? ठीक है, earlier they were not surviving, so they were not burden for the parents. But most of these children will be ultimately surviving. And that is why if you talk about, if you are having more number of children, it will become a burden for the future. So slowly this realization will come in and people will have lower fertility. ठीक है, so कहने का मतलब है कि here when we are talking about this, so what we find that सबसे पहले डेथ रेट डिक्लाइन होता है. But you know, when we are talking about the fertility, fertility will continue to remain high. Why it will continue to remain high? क्योंकि जब तक ये डेथ रेट एक sufficiently low level तक डिक्लाइन नहीं करेगा, till then people will not have the confidence of that most of the children will be surviving. So once it has fallen to a sufficiently low level, this is the time when fertility will also begin to decline. ठीक है, and that is why there is gap in the decline of fertility and motility. ठीक है, I hope it is clear. So this is how the fertility transition is taking place. In general, if you talk about mortality transition, it is more related with economic development. ठीक है, कैसे economic development? Did we saw? Was it related with food security? Yes or no? Was it related with development of technology? That means investment in technology. ठीक है, so it is more related with economic development. But when we are talking about fertility transition is more of, it is related with socio-economic development. ठीक है, for example, tell me, if there is the status of women in the society increases, does it means that more women will be entering the workforce? And does it means that there will be delay in marriages? ठीक है, if you know about fecundity, what is fecundity? Fecundity is the ability of women to produce children. ठीक है, so fecundity is very high in young women, particularly if you talk about between the age of 16 to 22. It is very high. That means if a woman has a conception or if exposure to intercourse is there in this age, the chances that she will become pregnant will be very high. ठीक है, ultimately this fecundity levels begin to decline in your later 20s, particularly after 28. and after 30s you can understand it will further decline. That means in this age the chances of conception will be comparatively lower. ठीक है? So does it means that if people are getting married late, particularly women, will it affect your fertility levels? Obviously it will have impact on fertility. So it is not just economic phenomena, it is a social phenomena. ठीक है? Take another example of social process. There is a phenomena referred to as secularization. Secularization क्या होता है? It is a phenomena whereby the society's control or the religious control of religion in the society reduces. So this phenomena is referred to as the phenomena of secularization. ठीक है? So tell me, can we say today has it happened? The role of religion in social affairs is declining, no doubt about that. पहले के जो लोग होते थे घर से निकलने से पहले मंदिर जाना पड़ता था. Today they don't have to go. So when there is increasing secularization, individuals will become more free. And as they become more free, the fertility decisions will be more based on individuals rather than societal decisions. And this will also reduce the fertility levels. So this is what we are saying. Fertility transition is more of a what? It is a socio-economic phenomena, socio-economic developments. And when it comes to fertility transition, it is inevitable. ठीक है? वो उल्टा नहीं होता. It cannot be changed. Once it begins to decline, historically we have seen it has not changed. You can understand कि अभी तक परसेप्शन ये था कि चाइना कैन डू एनीथिंग, बट यहां पर चाइना भी फेल हो गई. दे हैव ट्राइड सो मच बट दे हैवंट बीन एबल टू अचीव इट. ठीक है? देन एज ट्रांजिशन, if this phenomena is taking place, there will be change in this age pyramid also taking place. So if we look into, इसमें बस एक स्टेज 4 का ये जो पिरामिड है ये गड़बड़ है, इसको मैं बता दूंगा कैसे. इस तरह का होता है. तो सबसे पहले स्टेज 1 में क्या होता है? देयर इज pyramid will be more like this, very broad at the base and it will progressively become tapering at the top. Can you understand क्यों ऐसा हो रहा होगा? Because this is stage 1. Do we find that mortality rates are higher? ठीक है? और देखो mortality rates की अगर हम बात करें तो this is the mortality trend. This is, suppose we are talking about mortality, this is the age. So 0 to 15 and 40. So mortality tends to be higher where? In the young age group, because physiologically these are weak individuals. But as you cross 15, ultimately you become stronger. So the mortality essentially declines and here it is lower. But as you are crossing that age of 35, 40, then what happens? Again physiologically you begin to become weaker. देखा होगा कि majority of footballers begin to retire along these ages. ठीक है? Why? Because physiologically you are becoming older. So your capacity to ultimately withstand the environmental stresses will be reducing. So thus this is the period you'll find that again mortality will begin to rise. So this is the case. Obviously उस टाइम पर ये जो मोर्टालिटी था ये बहुत हाई था, चिल्ड्रन में और भी ज्यादा हाई होगा, ऑब्वियस सी बात है. तो कैन आई से कि अगर सपोज करो कि देयर वर 100 चिल्ड्रन born, by the time they are reaching to the age of 1, only 70 of them will survive. Yes or no? By the time they are reaching to the age of 15, what will happen? Only 30 of them are surviving. So it is progressively becoming what? Upwards tapering. So this is the age structure of the society. The society you will be finding it will be dominated by young age group. ठीक है, infants and children 0 to 15 एज ग्रुप विल डोमिनेट हाईएस्ट परसेंटेज. फिर आता है स्टेज टू. स्टेज टू में क्या होता है? इट विल स्टिल रिमेन ब्रॉडर एट द बेस बट समथिंग चेंजेस एंड इट इज लाइक दिस. ऐसा हो गया. तो वाई ऐसा हो गया? इसको देखो कैसे होता है. मान लो कि हम 1960 की बात कर रहे हैं एंड 1960 में द फर्टिलिटी वॉज द TFR एट दैट टाइम वॉज हाई. ठीक है, पीपल वर प्रोड्यूसिंग मोर चिल्ड्रन बट एट दैट सेम टाइम टेक्नोलॉजी अलाउड शार्प रिडक्शन इन मोर्टालिटी. और वो शार्प रिडक्शन इन मोर्टालिटी कहां पर फील होगा? कैन आई से हियर? इट विल हैव मोस्ट इंपैक्ट. ठीक है, सो दैट मीन्स कि जो 1960 के डिकेड में, 60s के डिकेड में जो बच्चे बॉर्न हुए, द चिल्ड्रन हु आर बॉर्न, मेजॉरिटी ऑफ देम आर सर्वाइविंग. ठीक है, तो इन नेक्स्ट 10-20 years what has happened, or 10 years what has happened, people have by this time realized that if you produce more number of children, what will be happening? Majority of them are going to survive, and thus a behavioral change will come in them and their fertility will be reducing. ठीक है, so अब क्या हो गया है? The fertility has reduced, but जो 1960 में जो children born हुए थे, they are still there and most of them are surviving. So that is why this broader base has shifted upwards in the higher age group. ठीक है, so it is no more in the infant category, it has now gone where? In the children category. 5 से 15 के बीच में आ गया. I hope you get my point. So why the shape is like this? Still, if you talk about, there is dominance of 0 to 15 age group people. Then comes the third stage. In the third stage, we will be finding it is the period when fertility begins to decline sharply, and we find now the pyramid will become more like this. It will be becoming more like this. Obviously, can understand ऐसा क्यों होगा? Because fertility और कम हो गया. People have realized. और वो जो उस समय जो बच्चे थे जिनकी एज ग्रुप थी, जो यहाँ पर जो 5 से 15 वाले एज ग्रुप था, by this time what would have happened? They would have become more aged and they would have reached in the working age group. ठीक है, so the broadness of the pyramid, it now shifts further up in the working age group. So this is the change which is taking place in the third stage of demographic transition. Now more people are located where? In the working age. This is what we call it as the demographic dividend. This is essentially your demographic dividend. Then if you talk about fourth stage में आते आते, remember this mortality graph. What is happening with your, once you are crossing that age of 40, you become weaker. ठीक है, so यहां से mortality tends to again increase. So this, if you talk about the pyramid which is broader, still broader here, now most of these people, as they are crossing that age of 40, they will not be able to survive. Large number of people would not be able to survive. Okay? And thus what will happen? In stage 4, the pyramid will become more like a cylinder. Like this. It will become more like a cylindrical shape. ठीक है, बिकॉज वो जो बल्ज था पिरामिड का वो खत्म हो गया, बिकॉज most or large number of people couldn't survive beyond the 40, 45, 50 age group. So now that bulge has essentially gone. So this is stage 4 of demographic transition. You must be aware, today we are also talking about stage 5 of demographic transition. Many countries are located in stage 5 of demographic transition. So now the fertility is very, very low, and this is the kind of scenario which is taking place. So there is male, there is females. So now there is एजिंग फिनोमेना. अभी जो हमने लास्ट में बात किया 70s के बाद जो इन्वेस्टमेंट किया गया, हेल्थ टेक्नोलॉजीज बढ़ गई, तो नाउ मोर ओल्ड एज पीपल आर सर्वाइविंग, एंड दस पीपल इन द एज ग्रुप ऑफ 60 प्लस, their percentage is increasing. You can understand the case of Japan, very, very famous. So their percentage is now increasing. ठीक है. So now it becomes like a inverted pyramid. First case में कैसा था? It was a pyramid. Now it has become more like an inverted pyramid. So this is taking place. Also, you know, if you talk about, there is male, there is female. Survival of female is greater. Life expectancy of female is greater than male. ठीक है. So ultimately you can understand that thus here there is narrowness which is there when you are reaching in that age group. So there is more feminization of population also taking place as the population becomes older. ठीक है. So clearly there is this transition taking place. फिर माइग्रेशन ट्रांजिशन भी हो रहा है, और माइग्रेशन ट्रांजिशन में क्या हो रहा है? इट स्टार्ट्स विथ स्टेज 2. सो इन स्टेज 2 हमें क्या क्या मिल रहा है? देयर इज हाई पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ. ठीक है. बिकॉज ऑफ हाई पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ देयर इज लॉट्स ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. So a society which was very static with low mobility initially, here what happens? People will begin to migrate. There will be migration taking place. So here in stage 2, migration begins. Mobility begins. ठीक है. अब देखो सोसाइटी में बहुत सारे चेंजेस और हो रहे हैं. व्हाट आर द चेंजेस विच आर टेकिंग प्लेस? डेवलपमेंट के चेंजेस हो रहे हैं. इन इफ यू टॉक अबाउट अर्बनाइजेशन चेंज हो रहा है, लेवल्स चेंज हो रहे हैं. सो व्हाट विल बी हैपनिंग एज द सोसाइटी रीचेस स्टेज 3? कैन वी से टेक्नोलॉजी वुड हैव इंक्रीज्ड? यस और नो? देयर विल बी बेटर टेक्नोलॉजी, बेटर ट्रांसपोर्टेशन टेक्नोलॉजी, more diversity of economy will be found in the society. So as the diversity of economy increases, what it will do to the migration numbers? It will increase the migration numbers. So as you reach stage 3, we will find that the migration will further increase. There will be further acceleration of migration. As you reach stage 4, migration further accelerates. In modern societies there is more migration taking place. ठीक है. At least internal migration is high because there is high level of technology. Space and time आज के टाइम में बहुत shrink हो गया. So there is, with demographic transition, migration transition is also occurring. With demographic transition there is also urban transition taking place. So urban transition की अगर हम बात करें तो this is what we call it as the urban curve. This is your urban curve. So this is stage 1 of demographic transition. this is your stage 2 of demographic transition, this is your stage 3 of demographic transition, and this is stage 4. Stage 4 में there can be 3 scenarios, 1, 2 and 3. So this phenomena is referred to as the urban curve. This graph is referred to as the urban curve. Here is the urbanization level, and this is essentially time. ठीक है, तो देखो अब इसमें क्या हो रहा है, स्टेज 1 की अगर हम बात करें तो यहां पर अर्बनाइजेशन लेवल क्या है, इट इज वेरी लो, इट इज लेस देन ऑन एन एवरेज इफ यू टॉक अबाउट, हियर द अर्बनाइजेशन लेवल्स विल बी लेस देन 10 to 15%, यही रेट रहता है। लेकिन जब यहां पर पहुंच जा रहे हैं तो अर्बनाइजेशन जो लेवल्स हैं वो कहां तक पहुंच जाते हैं, दे गो अबव 70%। ठीक है, so stage 1 में why the urbanization levels are low? Can we say the society is mostly agrarian? ठीक है, and few cities, few towns would exist. दो ही तरह के towns exist करेंगे, कौन से? Market towns and administrative towns. Two type of towns mainly will be existing. These will also be small. ठीक है, so at this point of time the cities have less population. Also more importantly, tell me, can we say जो problem normal stage 1 की है वो वहां पर भी cities में भी है? Yes or no? Can we say cities are cities also characterized by high mortality rates? वहां पे तो और ज्यादा epidemics fast फैलेंगे। ठीक है, so at that time can we say why there is low population in cities? One reason for low population of the cities is that the natural growth is stagnant or very slow. ठीक है, so there is natural growth of population is slow because of high mortality. ठीक है, so overall urbanization levels are low. But what will happen once you reach the stage 2? Can we say कि stage 2 में we will be finding that the natural growth of population will accelerate. Cities में तो ज़्यादा acceleration होगा because there is more economic development in the cities taking place. There is better health care. ठीक है, so in stage 2 this growth which is taking place, primary reason for this growth is what? Primary reason for this growth is the natural growth of population in urban areas. Natural growth of population in urban areas. एक और चीज में just before I continue, I just want to ask, do you know what is urbanization? What do you understand by the term urbanization? कोई बता सकता है यहाँ पे, कोई माइकल लाल है डेफिनेशन जो पता हो? ठीक है, दिस इज वन डेफिनेशन. अ मोर सिंपलर डेफिनेशन इज urbanization is a phenomena where number of people living in the urban areas increases. ठीक है, वो क्लासिफिकेशन, ठीक है, वो क्लासिफिकेशन की हम बात कर रहे हैं. सिंपली वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट व्हाट इज अर्बनाइजेशन. सो अर्बनाइजेशन इज अ प्रोसेस थ्रू विच नंबर ऑफ पीपल रिसाइडिंग इन अर्बन एरियाज इंक्रीज. ठीक है, या शेयर ऑफ पीपल लिविंग इन अर्बन एरियाज इंक्रीजेस. दिस इज अर्बनाइजेशन. तो अर्बनाइजेशन कैसे कैसे हो सकता है? 3 तरीके हो सकता है अर्बनाइजेशन. 1, can we say natural in population growth in the cities, that will add more people in the cities. 2, Can it be result of rural to urban migration? So that is second way. Third way is rural to urban classification. If you classify rural areas to cities, that will also add more people in the cities. ठीक है, तो ये तीन तरीके हो सकते हैं. अब हम इसमें दोनों को एक मान लेते हैं, रूरल अर्बन क्लासिफिकेशन एंड रूरल टू अर्बन माइग्रेशन, इसको एक मान लेते हैं. तो प्राइमरी रीजन स्टेज 2 में क्या है ग्रोथ का? इट इज नेचुरल ग्रोथ ऑफ पॉपुलेशन. एंड सेकेंडरी रीजन क्या है? द सेकेंडरी रीजन इज द माइग्रेशन फिनोमेनन एंड द क्लासिफिकेशन फिनोमेनन. ठीक है, आई होप यू गेट माई पॉइंट. इन स्टेज 3 अब ये बदल जाता. What is happening now? In stage 3 now, the primary reason becomes the migration and classification. That becomes the primary reason. Natural growth of population becomes a secondary reason. Why it will become a secondary reason? Can I say कि stage 3 में is it possible कि villages में भी fertility decline होगा? Yes or no? And if in villages also fertility decline is taking place, that means there will be less number of people, and that means there will be reduction in the migration. Sorry, मैं गलत बोल रहा हूँ. In stage 3 what is taking place? There is fertility decline occurring in the cities. ठीक है, क्योंकि fertility transition हो रहा है. तो अगर fertility decline होगा तो obvious सी बात है, natural growth of population will also decline. ठीक है. So that is basically what it is occurring in stage 3. So primary reason becomes migration and classification, secondary reason becomes the natural growth. जब हम stage 4 में पहुंच रहे हैं तो अब मुझे बताओ कि transition is complete in throughout the area, both urban and rural. That means can we say now that population growth दोनों जगह रुक गया? And does it means that there will be hardly people who will migrate from rural to urban? In fact, इस stage में there is a counter migration which begins to dominate. People begin to go from urban to rural areas. That becomes a more dominant phenomenon. ठीक है? So if this phenomena dominates, then the situation will be that of 3. Where there is decline in urbanization. ठीक है, तो देखो स्टेज 4 में अर्बनाइजेशन कौन से फैक्टर्स पर डिपेंड करेगा? वन फैक्टर विच विल डिटरमाइन द इज काउंटर अर्बनाइजेशन. देयर इज काउंटर अर्बनाइजेशन टेकिंग प्लेस. दैट मीन्स पीपल दे आर गोइंग फ्रॉम सिटी टू विलेज. प्लस द पॉलिसी ऑफ international migration. So the only way you can add more people now is that you adopt a more liberal policy of international migration. दूसरी कंट्री से जब लोग आएंगे तो can I say they will not come to settle in village? They will come for employment opportunities which are more available where? In the cities. ठीक है. अब इंटरनेशनल माइग्रेशन पॉलिसीज अगर हम देखें तो द इंटरनेशनल माइग्रेशन पॉलिसीज हैव बीन ऑफ 3 टाइप्स. वन हैज बीन अ मोर लिबरल पॉलिसी. अ गुड एग्जांपल ऑफ दिस लिबरल पॉलिसी जब होगी तो इसमें क्या होगा? स्लोली इंक्रीज होगा. ठीक है, और इसका एग्जांपल है यूएसए. ट्रेडिशनली यूएसए हैज अडॉप्टेड अ मोर लिबरल पॉलिसी ऑफ माइग्रेशन. ठीक है, दिस इज द रीजन यू माइट बी अवेयर नॉर्थ अमेरिका इज द मोस्ट अर्बनाइज्ड कॉन्टिनेंट ऑन अर्थ. ठीक है, देन योर पॉलिसी कैन बी लिटिल कंजर्वेटिव, नॉट सो मच फ्री. देन यू आर एबल टू काउंटर बैलेंस द टेंडेंसीज ऑफ दिस काउंटर अर्बनाइजेशन with addition through international migration, and in that case your urbanization levels would remain stable. Good example of this is Western Europe. Western Europe. There can, however, be a third scenario where your international migration policy is very, very restrictive. And if it is very restrictive, that means very less people will be arriving. In that case, due to counter urbanization being dominant, the urbanization rates can even decline. Very good example of this has been Australia before 1990s. ठीक है. So again, can you see, even in urbanization you can use the demographic transition model. Same thing if you talk about, so urban transition हो गया, household and family transition. So if you talk about the household and family transition, as the transition is taking place, tell me, number of things are changing. Like if you take the case of size of family. So in traditional society, what is the case of size of family? It is large. It becomes from large to small. Then what is happening with the nature of family? In traditional society, it is which type of family? Joint families. They give way to nuclear families. Similarly, other things like status of women. So what is happening with in the traditional society? The status of women is low. As the transition progresses, status of women will become high. ठीक है. Similarly, the household consumption. The nature of consumption which will be done by the household. Can we say here दो तरीके के consumption होते हैं. One is the survival consumptions and other is the luxury consumptions. ठीक है. So in the consumption rate of a family, initially क्या होगा? Mostly it will be related with the basic survival consumption. As the society progresses, what will happen? It will become more and more luxury. ठीक है. So there is lots of changes which are taking place in the household and family level as well when the demographic transition is taking place. Similarly, अगर इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ से मिलाएं तो टेल मी, यू हैव स्टडीड अबाउट रोस्टो मॉडल. So there is a traditional society, there is preconditions to take off, then there is take off stage, then there is drive towards maturity, and then there is age of high mass consumption. These are the 5 stages which are found. ठीक है. Can I say, will this correspond with stage 1 of the demographic transition? This will correspond with stage 2 of demographic transition. So there is the early stage 2 and this is the late stage 2. Drive towards maturity essentially corresponds with stage 3 of demographic transition. And the last stage of economic growth, it corresponds with stage 4 and 5, age of high mass consumption. ठीक है. So this is how it has historically happened in the developed world. So this is basically was the demand of the question. और ये बात हमें समझ में आ गई होगी. तो कैन यू अंडरस्टैंड कि डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन की कितनी यूटिलिटी है इन अंडरस्टैंडिंग वैरायटी ऑफ सोशो इकोनॉमिक चेंजेस विच आर अकरिंग इन द सोसाइटी. ठीक है. सो विल स्टॉप फॉर टुडे, विल कंटिन्यू दिस टुमारो.
Adam, you can join from website or you call the office, they'll help you out.